Hello and a warm welcome. You're watching India Tonight with me, Jude Sanith, joining you from our Chennai studios, even as my colleague Shibani Garat joins in from Mumbai. Now, it's a rather grim start to the bulletin, largely because, as we have been reporting and the globe has rather been fearing, West Asia is witnessing a fresh round of escalations in the ongoing crisis. In fact, the UAE has accused Iran of launching 2 ballistic missiles, and following the alleged Iranian strike, Abu Dhabi, we're told, has also put a freeze on ties with Tehran. So, Shivani, it seems like deja vu all over again. Just when the globe was heading to peace in the West Asia region, these escalations don't seem like good news, especially in the pursuit of peace in the region.
Absolutely, Jude. Now, the UAE Foreign Ministry, in fact, has announced that all trade, commercial exchanges and financial transactions with Iran have been halted until further notice, raising fear of another UAE-Iran war. Meanwhile, with Hormuz deadlock continuing, more than 80% of the vessels transit through the Strait of Hormuz over the past 2 weeks have used the Omani route. We have Sumita with more details on this.
That's right. West Asia is witnessing fresh escalation because the UAE has accused Iran of launching 2 ballistic missiles. And of course, in light of that, the UAE has suspended all trade with Iran. And remember, this is in light of the regional escalations that we have seen. But Iran, on its part, has denied firing 2 ballistic missiles that the UAE said that they were targeting the maritime navigation in the country. Remember, the UAE is one of Iran's largest commercial partners, and it ranks only second to China. So, of course, this is a major escalation, even though attacks on the UAE have been happening since the beginning of this war, since Iran started bombing, or started attacking rather, Middle Eastern countries. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has spoken with UAE's National Security Advisor Sheikh Tahnoon bin Zayed Al Nahyan to discuss key regional security issues. In fact, as far as the economic squeeze is concerned, that now seems to be more pronounced, because the Iranian foreign minister has said that the U.S. maritime blockade of Iranian ports, that has contributed to goods shortages and price increases. And as it is, Iran was dealing with a bad economic situation earlier on as well. Now, Tehran has also lost significant control of the Strait of Hormuz, is what the data is showing. Now, with 80% of transits taking through the Omani route. And on the back of that, oil prices have been hovering near the above $90 barrel mark, because the talks between Iran and the United States, they remain at an impasse.
Well, like Sumita was explaining there, bad news for peace in the region, bad news for oil prices as well. And if markets are any indication to go by, it doesn't make for great reading as far as the exchanges are concerned as well. So to break this down for us and hopefully take us through what lies ahead in the West Asia region and its neighboring geographies, I'm joined by a panel of experts. David Roche is a strategist at Quantum Strategy. Syed Akif Zaidi also joins us. He's, of course, a researcher and a West Asia expert at the Al Mustafa International University in Iran. David, if I could start with you, give me your opening remarks, if you will. What do you make of this re-escalation of sorts in West Asia, with the UAE now definitively cutting ties with Iran over the alleged missile strike? Where is this likely to go from here?
Well, actually, I would add one little anecdotal story, which is quite interesting, which is that the Saudi Arabians have imposed increased financial regulatory scrutiny of any transactions with the UAE. So it's not only across the Gulf, between the Gulf states and Iran, they're also fighting among each other. Okay, now let me boil this down to what I actually believe. The thing that matters for the people who watch your program is money. And the thing that matters to money is whether the tankers are moving or not moving. Not only, of course, through the Straits of Hormuz, but also through the Red Sea. And I'll give you the bottom line. The tankers are not moving, and they haven't been moving. The amount of oil coming out of the Middle East, despite Donald Trump's mendacious claims that it's tens of millions of dollars of oil, tens of millions of barrels of oil a day, that's a lie. It's not. It's 5 million. Okay, if we are getting 5 million out of the Gulf, that means the world is short of between 11 and 14 million barrels a day. Now, why does that matter? It matters for 2 reasons. The first reason is that gap, that hole, is being plugged by inventories. And those inventories will reach the 30-day minimum by the middle of September in the OECD region. And of course, that puts a major squeeze on India too. The second point is that because oil is not available in the way that it used to be, the refineries are operating at much lower efficiencies globally. So if you put 100 barrels of oil into a refinery today, you get out 96 barrels in terms of refined product. So what that actually means is that when you look at the petrol market, the diesel market, and so on, the squeeze on energy is getting worse faster because the refineries are operating in an environment in which they cannot produce refined products efficiently. So anyway, to wrap it all up, we're short of oil. It's going to get worse. Prices are going to go up, probably to $125 a barrel. The US has got absolutely no answers to this. And Iran is going to remain rejoicing at the fact that it is in charge of the Gulf and is probably going to remain so.
Right. Since you rightly pointed out, Mr. Roche, let's first, important for the audience to know about money. Let's go over to Mr. Zaidi over here. Thank you for patiently waiting. Now, when it comes to money and bilateral trade between UAE and Iran is around $30 billion annually. How will this escalation impact the region? What will be the kind of impact with other neighbors? As Mr. Roche pointed out, the escalation and the trade deal between Saudi and Iran, which was like a conversation which was brokered by China back in 2023. Mr. Zaidi?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for having me on your show. Any kind of friction between the UAE and Saudi Arabia or these other countries in the southern Persian Gulf region, while it is important to a certain degree, it is ultimately a sideshow and a footnote. The fundamental clash and confrontation is between Iran and its allies, called the Axis of Resistance, and America and its allies on the other side. So I think we should, if we need to understand what's happening and get some sense of what may happen in the future, we need to focus on the conflict between these two forces. The other the statements issued by the UAE or Saudi Arabia are of little consequence in this larger framework. As your earlier guest correctly pointed out, Iran understands that it's at a much stronger position than the USA in this conflict, and definitely at a much stronger position than where it was when this conflict was begun by an illegal attack on the 28th of February by the USA. And therefore, it understands that it has to wear down the global American empire, particularly in the West Asian region. Of course, the blockade imposed by the USA does impose a cost on Iranian society and its economy, but the Iranians understand that the cost being imposed by them on the USA and its allies economically here, my discussion is at this point only economically, is far greater. And the ability of the Iranian society, the people and its economy, which has weathered more than almost 5 decades of Western sanctions, its ability to absorb a further punishment is several degrees higher, several times higher of this punishment. We see the US Petroleum Strategic Reserve dropping rapidly. We see gasoline prices and diesel prices at oil companies are reaping in enormous profits during this time. Anger regarding this, anger and fear and apprehension in American society is growing. We see signs of small level mutinies in the US military as well, and many other signs and symbols as well. For example, this report that you mentioned, this report which says that 80% of the ships are using the Omani route. In Iran, this has been received today with some kind of amusement, because the same report also points out that the passage, and as your earlier guest as well indicated, the number of ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz has dropped by 95% compared to pre-war levels. So of the remaining 5%, the claim now says, of the remaining 5%,
Right. I think we're having a bit of a network issue with Mr. Zaidi there, but we'll sort that out. And and get back to some very interesting insights that in fact he was making. But David, if I could quickly, jump back over to you for just a bit. What do you make of it? What we are hearing the Iranian side, and of course, Syed, of course, is does work at the international university, the Al Mustafa International University in Iran, is that the country is largely seeing its people and its forces develop the ability to absorb. Now, for the longest time, we've been reading this war and making sense of it as a war of attrition that has largely been, that embarked on by the Iranian side in response to, attacks by the U.S. Do you see this likely to continue? And if yes, what you've already mentioned what could well be the fallout of it in the oil front, but purely from a peace point of view, it doesn't seem like good news if the Iranian side is going to continue, putting up a fight and continue this ability to absorb. David,
look, I'll be more blunt about it. The people who dominate power in Iran, are the IRGC and the hardline faction within the actual government in Tehran. And these people do not give a damn about the welfare of their people. Not at all. This leadership does not give a damn. They are in the business of a religious and a geopolitical ideology, which they will pursue even if it inflicts great hardship on their people. I don't think it is fair to say that, the crowds are in the streets massing in support of this policy. They are certainly not resisting this policy, but that may be because they're cowed. After all, young people who demonstrated on the streets are being hanged every day with sham trials to authorize this happening. And I think they're more cowed than jubilant about the policy. But you can resist economic harm, economic suffering for a very long time under a dictatorial and particularly an ideological and religious dictatorial regime. And that's what's happening. So Trump's idea that he could starve the Iranians into submission or bomb the Iranians into admission simply tell us that Trump is ignorant. Because Iran has the power to resist, but we have to understand this is not a social democracy, which is, everybody coming together to resist the nasty Americans. This is an efficient and totalitarian regime which has no regard for what its people thinks and is in a position to pursue its aims, which is the dominance of the Gulf, which it has succeeded in achieving and which it is not going to surrender.
Now, Mr. Rosh, I'm going to ask you, what will be the kind of impact on, the global shipping conglomerates, given that, now Strait of Hormuz seems to be a continuous volatile region? Mr. Rosh, yes.
Yes, I'm there. Global shipping conglomerates are, with the exception of the unfortunate crews that are both suffering and in some cases killed within the actual Gulf, the global shipping conglomerates are laughing the whole way to the bank because what this war does is to prolong all the trade routes around Africa, et cetera, et cetera. We can go into them. There are about 5 major active choke points in the world at the moment, which simply mean that these ships have to sail for longer to get to a given destination. Now, the shipping companies are actually charge people for that. So they are in a situation where capacity is tight because it's tied up on longer logistical shipping routes. And they are making higher margins because they're passing that on completely to the customers. So this is this is a good scenario for shippers, containers in particular, tankers, and also for shipbuilders.
Right. Syed Zaidi, coming back to you, I know that you were interrupted there a little while ago when we were experiencing some technical difficulties, but I just want to talk about this alleged attack that has been at the very fulcrum of these re-escalation of hostilities in West Asia. With the UAE now closing off ties with Iran, especially after those 2 missile strikes, who stands to gain really from the aggression here? And just when there was some semblance of peace and a possible peace deal being inked, the fact that this comes up again, who's gaining out of this, and why does it prolong and continue for this long? And is there any way out, Mr. Saeed Zaidi?
I think it's a very important question, and definitely there is a way out, and the way out has been on the table for a long time, and that is America accepting the defeat that has been inflicted upon it and moving out of the West Asian region and ceasing to be the colonial power and the hegemon that disrupts and dominates this region. That's the way out, and we will get there. It may take a couple of years, but that's the way out fundamentally. Coming to this attack on the UAE, this has been denied by Iran, and this is not the first false flag attack. Over the last 6 months, we've had false flag attacks initially attributed to Iran, but then nothing came of it in Turkey, in Azerbaijan, in Diego Garcia, in Egypt, in Pakistan as well. So there have been multiple instances of false flag attacks attributed to Iran, but then nothing came of it. Iran has denied these so-called attacks on the UAE, and therefore I think the question has to be answered by whoever ultimately is discovered for being responsible for these attacks. Regarding Iran and the UAE's trade links, the trade links between these two countries are fundamentally hinge upon sanctions. How shall I say? A way to get around sanctions, because it basically, the UAE fundamentally for Iran is a transshipment point that allows sanctions to be bypassed. Of course, this happens with the UAE makes a lot of money out of it. Western powers as well are, kind of wink at it for some time. There is no fundamental economic relationship or deep economic relationship between Iran, which is a large country with a diversified economy, and Dubai, which is basically the UAE, particularly Dubai in particular, which is basically an oil producer and a transshipment entrepot. So this is not seen as a really serious matter in Iran, these statements by the UAE. Even if they stick to this matter, there are various other options. There is Oman for transshipment, there is Pakistan, and many others as well. This is fundamentally a battle or a war going on between America and between Iran to see who it is, to see whether American dominance can be maintained. American dominance, which has dominated West Asia for almost 80 years now, can that be maintained further? Or as the signs are showing that this is drawing to an end. So I do believe this will come to an end. This will come to an end. We've seen all the US bases in the southern Persian Gulf countries and Jordan as well either badly hit or have folded up completely. The media has been using a term called debasification. I think that's the first big step in the exit of American hegemony from this region. But the debasification itself is not enough. There has to be economic delinking as well. And of course, political changes have to happen as well. And this is why I say it may take a couple of years. But the fundamental point that we will get at, where this conflict will end, where the oil and gas will flow freely again, and probably at prices much lower than they used to be in the past when this market was dominated by the petrodollar, which will no longer have its hegemony in a couple of years from now. At that point, we're going to see a very different world and a much better world for the world's masses, including the American people, which have been subjected to gasoline prices of more than $4 per gallon for several months now because of this foolish war that has been launched by their president and by their regime. So I think we are heading towards something positive, but it may take a little more time.
That's the word coming in from Mr. Zaidi. We are heading towards something positive. Hope that happens. Thank you so much, Mr. Zaidi and Mr. Rosh, for joining us today on ET Now. I'm afraid due to paucity of time, we will have to wrap this conversation right now. Well, moving on, going across to the U.S. markets, the Dow Jones is leading the gains, rising more than 0.5% as investors react to the U.S. Treasury's plan to ease pressure on the bond market. The Treasury Department has announced plans to at least double its government debt buybacks, targeting bonds in 10 to 30-year maturity segment. The move has pushed long-term Treasury yields lower and provided some support to equities. The S&P 500 is also trading higher by more than 0.1%. And then the Nasdaq remains largely flat, slightly in the red. Well, it is time for us to slip. It is time for us to slip into a very short break. You don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on India Tonight.
Welcome back. You're watching India Tonight with Shibani and myself, Jude Sanat, bringing you all the updates that took place through the day today. Let's shift focus next and take a look at how markets fared for most part of the day. The Nifty, remember, closed below the 24,100 marks. Banks largely lagged while the broader market slipped. IT emerged as the top sectoral gainer, while FMCG and oil and gas stocks also corrected. Max Healthcare and Coal India were the top losers on the Nifty today. My colleague Snehi is here as always with more details from the markets.
Well, yes, yet another subdued day coming in for the market, and this is the 7th straight day where we've seen pressure coming in on the Nifty and Nifty ending in the red. That being said, we've ended at 24,078. At one point of the trading day, we were very close to breaching that 24,000 mark. However, we've not slipped below the 24,000 mark as of yet, and we've managed to hold above that. It's a 77-point cut coming in on the index and 0.3% lower for the Nifty. Slightly elevated cut seen for the Sensex, 0.4% lower. The Nifty Bank, however, saw a little recovery from the day's low and ended absolutely flat. But the pressure on the broader end of the market persisted. You've seen mid-cap index lower by 0.2 and slightly more elevated pressure on the small-cap index. That index was lower by about 0.6%. Now let's tell you what the sectoral move was like, because barring IT, all the other sectors have closed in the red. IT was the only and top sectoral gainer. You had a move of about 0.7% on Nifty IT, despite a CLSA downgrade note coming in on some of the large-cap IT names. It was names like Coforge, HCL Tech, Oracle, Persistent, Wipro, Infosys that kept that index going. On the flip side, the biggest losing index and the steepest cuts we've seen is on Nifty Defense. That was led lower by Astra Micro, Cyan, DLM, BDL, MTAR Tech. This was followed by cuts in energy, media, FMCG, oil and gas, finance, as well as auto and pharma. Talking to you about what the Nifty 500 tilt looked like, you had about 350 stocks in the red and 150 in the green. So quite the tilt coming in towards the declines. So the biggest cuts on Netweb Tech, CESC, Acuitas, Semindia and HEG. And on the flip side, ICICI Pru AMC did very well, about a 6% uptick on that stock. GSK Pharma follow-up trade coming in very nicely. Keynes, RR Kabel, Nippon, Cyient, all of these stocks have done well from the broader end of the market. Another basket to watch out for was the sugar stocks on the news and report-based news that the government could be looking at doing away with that 100% duty on sugar. And on the back of that, you had Dhampur Mill, Sri Renuka, Balrampur, EID Perry, Triveni Engineering, Dalmia Bharat Sugar, all of them were doing well. The city gas distribution companies were doing well on the back of a source-based exclusive story in terms of compensation. So a couple of names, IGL, MGL, all of them were doing well as well. Couple of infra stocks on the back of order wins, some brokerage actions coming in as well. Some stocks were in focus on the back of that, but largely we've ended slightly under pressure when it comes to the index. 24,078 is where we've shut shop.
Now, market regulator SEBI has uncovered an alleged 1,000 crore rupees fraudulent loan scheme and issued an interim order against Dhenu Buildcon Infra Ltd and connected entities. Anurag Shah gets us more details on this.
Capital market regulator SEBI has passed an interim order against Dhenu Buildcon as SEBI uncovers 1,000 crore fraudulent loan scheme. So as per the SEBI's order, 1,000 crore unsecured loan was received by Dhenu Buildcon, but actual amount was 25 crore only, and that 25 crore only rotated again and again to show 1,000 crore. Later on, 840 crore of that 1,000 crore debt converted into equity shares, and there was a complex web transaction also found under the SEBI's investigation. The share price of Dhenu Buildcon jumps 200% without any improvement in business, and the market capitalization also rose from 3 crore to around 5,000 crore. So these are the findings of SEBI during the investigation. As SEBI has barred Dhenu Buildcon from SEBI has prohibited undertaking any corporate action, and 6 notices barred from dealing in Dhenu Buildcon shares, 2 entities barred from buying, selling or dealing in securities also after the SEBI's order.
And staying with more market action, sugar stocks are buzzing as global sugar prices surge and mounting supply concerns. This even as Brazil faces harvest disruptions and Thailand cuts its production forecast. In India, tight inventories and improving festive demand have pushed domestic sugar prices up nearly 20% for the month of August. Avi joins in with the key trends in the sugar market.
As Harsh rightly mentioned, the sugar sector has been buzzing, and we can see that the stocks have rallied in the range of 10 to 15% in the week gone by. That is on account of global supply crisis and constraints and the growing domestic demand. Talking about the US, raw sugar prices have crossed the key mark of 15 cents per pound and have now reached 16 cents per pound. Talking about Brazil, which is the world's largest sugar producer, has been facing adverse weather due to which their harvest season for sugar has been delaying. They've also suspended their bi-weekly production and harvest data for sugar, giving very limited visibility on the supply side of sugar. Thailand, in fact, has cut its production estimate to 9.5 metric tons, and the global sugar deficit is now being estimated in the range up to 3.3 metric tons. Talking about the Indian domestic market, we can see that the growing demand for sugarcane, along with higher ethanol production, also using molasses as a part of it, is now leading to growth in the sugar demand. Sugar exports, however, remained restricted until the 30th of September. And even after the restrictions are lifted for exports, we can see very limited exports being done from India with respect to sugar, because we have a lot of domestic demand to meet too. The domestic sugar prices have skyrocketed by almost 20% in the month of August alone. The inventory produced at around 37 rupees per kg now sits at around 47 to 55 rupees per kg, making some huge mega inventory gains for the sugar players in play. We can see that the inventory gain will help companies with better EBITDA margins, strong cash inflows, and of course an earnings upgrade that could come. Talking about the embedded total gains would range in the almost in the range of 500 to 800 crore rupees, and the Q2 to see inventory gains in the range of 100 to almost 250 crore rupees. The top beneficiaries would be Balrampur Chini, Triveni, and Dalmia. There are also reports that suggest the government is planning to cut absolutely the 100% sugar import that is applicable as of now to better make sure the availability of sugarcane in India and to support the growing demand in the domestic market. So all in all, we've seen that the sugar stocks have skyrocketed because of global supply constraints and the growing domestic demand, as it is also used in ethanol production.
Well, with that, sir, it's time for us to slip into a very short break. You don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on India Tonight.
Welcome back. You're watching India Tonight with Shibani and myself, Jude Sanat. On to our next big story of the day. The recent altitude drop incident on Air India's Phuket-Delhi flight has put the spotlight on aviation anti-dope testing norms and the need for stricter regulations. Now, reports state that the aviation watchdog DGCA is keen to strengthen the rules, and stakeholder opinions will in fact be sought. In fact, Shibani, this is a discussion we've been having multiple times over, especially on the need to bring in more stringent norms. It seems like the DGCA could well be biting the bullet on that front, especially when it comes to dope testing in Indian aviation.
Absolutely, Jude. And the Federation of Indian Pilots has in fact urged aviation safety regulator DGCA to consider oral fluid testing as a complementary method alongside with the existing urine-based screening under the drug testing framework. With the recent escalation, will there be a change in regulation? First up, my colleague Sumita gets us more updates on the recent happenings.
That's right. Following recent incidents of pilots failing doping tests, India's civil aviation regulator is reportedly considering a new and more stringent civil aviation requirement governing testing for psychoactive substances amongst aviation personnel. In fact, reports also suggest that the proposed CAR is aimed at strengthening the existing framework governing the testing of aviation personnel for consumption of psychoactive substances. Now, this meeting is expected to be about new provisions that are related to the testing processes, and that includes changing in testing requirements, sample size. The Federation of Indian Pilots, remember, that has reportedly urged the Director General of Civil Aviation for a comprehensive overhaul of the country's psychoactive substance testing regulations. And remember, this is coming in after the incident on an Air India flight earlier this month happened. Of course, the pilot's body has asked for double mandatory random drug testing, introducing oral fluid testing screening along with exercising existing urine tests and enforcing strict procedural safeguards to protect crew members. So, of course, how that representation is now going to be taken up by the DGCA, that remains to be seen.
Well, thanks, Sumita, for bringing us that all-important update. Now, to make sense of what exactly the change in regulations mean and why it's being brought in now at this time and place, and what exactly the changes, we're joined by a very special guest. Captain Dhenu Wadia is the founder-president of the Federation of Indian Pilots. Captain Wadia, thank you so much for joining us on India Tonight on the Bulletin today. My first question to you, help us make sense of this. Now, what the Federation of Indian Pilots has done is urged the DGCA to consider the oral fluid testing as a complementary method to existing screening mechanisms that are followed. But I sometimes wonder, sir, did it actually take an incident much like this one to actually press for the need for a more comprehensive complementary testing method? Should this not have been the standard to perhaps be followed in the first place so as to prevent the possibility of events much like this, Captain Wadia?
Yes, first of all, let me clarify that any substance, whether it's liquor, drugs, or any substance that will impair this normal, clear thinking of a pilot in the aircraft is certainly not acceptable at all. In this particular case, just because the media has covered it so strongly about this aircraft dropping and the pilot having had drugs, I think there seems to be a knee-jerk reaction. First of all, I am not sure whether there are enough testing laboratories available in Bombay, Delhi, etc., for carrying out more drug tests on anyone, whether it's pilots, ATC, or engineers, or whoever. But if you have the facilities and you do test it, and if there's any substance which can hamper your normal thinking, is certainly not acceptable, and the stringent action needs to be taken and must be taken. There's no two ways about it. However, a little more thought needs to be into the testing methods, what is the procedure, and the pilots need to be informed in the airlines as to even, say, a polluted food item may induce or give you a positive result of a drug. So a little more studies and a little more awareness and information should be available to the aviation authorities.
Thank you so much for joining us, Captain Dhenu Wadia. Now, Air India, in particular, has faced several, severe scrutiny over pilot fatigue and the kind of grueling rosters that they have, and not just Air India, many airlines around the world. So help us understand, and I wanted to gauge your perspective since you are a, you lead a pilot body. Help us understand to what extent is, this entire systemic fatigue causing the pilots to, resort to some of these psychoactive substances to probably, rest or sleep?
First of all, I don't think any opinion is required on this subject at all, because what you ask for is flight and duty time limitations, etc. There's no compromise on safety at all. Now, these duty time limitations are not at the whims and fancy of the airlines or DGCA. These have been found to be in effect in the world all over, depending on research done on the human body as to how much rest is required after how much time. It used to be stringently followed earlier. Now I know because of material considerations or the financial consideration of the airline, very often the director of operations or director of the airlines tell the pilot, we've got DGCA dispensation. First of all, on a matter of safety, I don't think any dispensation can be given or should be given at all. Even earlier, the Minister of Civil Aviation had said something about dispensation being given for safety compromise, which is certainly not acceptable. So any item, whether you're sleep deprivation or flight and duty time limitations or drugs or liquor or whatever, safety cannot be compromised under any circumstances. There's no two ways about it.
Absolutely, there's no compromise for safety on any flight or any other critical operation for that matter. Thank you for breaking that down, Captain Wadia. We're also being joined by Surjit Panesar, aviation expert, on the phone line. Mr. Panesar, thank you so much for joining the broadcast. What do you make of the Federation of Indian Pilots' appeal to DGCA to consider oral fluid testing? Better late than never, you reckon, Mr. Panesar?
Yeah, I agree with you, but listen to me, this Federation of Indian Pilots, I don't know how experts they have it, but in my opinion, which is a very strong opinion, that whenever you carry out the test, dope test, drug test, we must have a team of doctors and have a scientific study. Sometimes if you take a cough syrup and you go to the airport, alcohol doesn't show a little bit of alcohol in the blood because we have taken so we have to find out what medicines, if a pilot has taken, will that also affect the dope test and all that? It needs a very big scientific study, what drugs will prove, and limitation of drug tests also to be known very well. Although I agree with you that having drugs and all that is not acceptable anywhere in the country, especially marijuana and all that. But before you carry out the test, let there be a scientific study by the doctors that suppose a person is taking some regular medicine for blood pressure or some other reasons and the medicinal point, will those drugs also come out in showing the dope test also? It requires a deep study before we jump onto the decision immediately, the pilot to ground the pilots and all that. I personally feel that the machine should be tested, sanitized properly, and the test should be done as per the dope test analysis, and the limitation should also be shown to the pilot. I have seen some pilots who have never taken alcohol in their life, but sometimes the breath analysis test shows positive alcohol. So there has to be some study by the doctor, scientific study to find out what are the drugs if you take, and then the airlines must issue medicinal circular that the following drugs you watch out before you go for the dope test and all that. This is my opinion.
And before you joined in, Mr. Surjit Panesar, in fact, joining us here, Captain Meenu Wadia had, in fact, raised a very critical question, Mr. Panesar. He said that are there enough certified labs to test thousands of pilots quickly, and that too on a daily, on an hourly basis? And then where is the loophole over here? Also, given the saliva test, is it easier to cheat as compared to urine test? How do we find out?
Ma'am, let me tell you one thing. These tests should be done in the government hospitals, not in the private hospitals. All these tests should be done in a government hospital where the doctors are responsible for giving the results and the test and the final results and all that. I find the private hospitals are not very competent to give you the positive testing. There's a proper procedure for the testing. In one of the cases, like a flight from Phuket to Delhi, those medical tests in Medanta hospital are not done as per the dope test checklist. Why they have not done like that? The question is, it should be done in a government hospital where they are held responsible for each and every step of the test. They have done it. And there should be definitely a study on these things. What drugs can also give you the effect of the dope test also?
Right.
You see, it is not jump on the...
Captain Wadia, absolutely. No, so thank you. You made a very important point, Mr. Panesar, and that is the fact that if you do these tests, they need to be done in perhaps the most credible manner possible. And if that be done in a government institution or a government medical center or a hospital, so be it. So, Captain Wadia, I have to ask you, does it all boil down to, in many ways, a case of easier said than done? Surely these suggestions and submissions to the DGCA come with the utmost, the best of intent. Safety is no doubt front and center of the very reason that these submissions and proposals even came to be. But implementing it, like we have been speaking of, and ensuring that the credibility associated with it at such a large scale, given the fact that these tests probably have to be run hours, every other hour, if not every day. Surely there's a lot of infrastructure that must be mobilized to have it done in the most foolproof manner possible, Captain Wadia.
That's a very important point. And I'd like to doubly endorse exactly what Captain Panesar had told you earlier, that even I have seen that people who are totally teetotalers, had never had liquor in their lives, have tested positive before going on a flight. For the simple reason that earlier all pilots were aware that even cough syrup can give you a positive result. Same thing with the drugs also. The little more, and as I mentioned earlier, this seems to be a little knee-jerk reaction. By all means, if your total system is 100% in place and you're 100% sure that the person has consumed drugs, no sympathy needs to be shown at all. But before doing that, let's find out ways and means as to which are the drugs which can show positive results, which might be even food contamination, could be some medication that the pilots have been taking. So awareness and study needs to be done properly, and a foolproof, safe method evolve before you implement the law.
To Mr. Surjit Panesar for his final word. And as an aviation expert, help us understand what is the kind of impact that it will have on the aviation sector in India, considering it's a duopoly market already. The airlines, especially, in the coming months when there is fog, face delays, there are passengers who are trapped inside airports for hours. If this is mandated, will Aam Janta, consumers, travelers like us, if the drug tests are mandated before the flight, will there be delays? What will be the impact of this going forward?
You see, I personally, I agree with you. First of all, let me tell you, there's no escape from the flight safety and all that. No, we must have a study by the doctor which drugs can affect you. It is not only dope test we carry, it just became positive. Why it has become positive? They should study the pilot's medical history also. Has he been taking some medicine? There are certain medicines for the blood pressure, sugar. There's so many medicines are available. Pilots are taking it. Sometimes the fatigue also, they take some medicine. They don't get sleep. They take sleep tablets also. Now, whether these tablets and all these will affect the dope test or not, there's a proper procedure mentioned in you can see in the Google map. What are the Google procedures for checking on the dope? Was it carried out properly? And I can assure you, once again, I'm telling you, it should be done in a government hospital, not private, which can be influenced also. There are people who can write anonymous complaint against Mr. A, B, and they carry out a test and they pass him or fail him. So the government hospitals are not influenced by all these things. I personally feel the test should be done in government hospitals because they are responsible for anything wrong. They can be punished also. And there should be deep study on the drugs and all which can affect the dope test by all the doctors. And then the airline should issue the medicine bulletin to all the pilots. The following drugs may affect your dope test or alcohol test and all that. And you should avoid these things and all before the flight because there's no margin for safety and all that. They should be tested positively.
Well, the fact is that, Captain Panesar and Captain Wadia, while the intention and the intent behind that proposal to, solidify the dope testing and, random testing on pilots comes from a place of safety being put first, there's a long road ahead before it is implementable in perhaps the most credible way possible. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining Shibani and myself on the Bulletin tonight to break down the intricacies behind more comprehensive testing. Great speaking with you on the show. And moving on next, U.S. Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, is on a visit to Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, during his Srinagar visit, he met Chief Minister Omar Abdullah and said that both leaders discussed ways to deepen economic collaboration and create opportunities that would mutually benefit both India and the United States. In a significant statement, Sergio Gore also said that Kashmir is an important part of India and that the US will reconsider its advisories on travel to the Union Territory. In fact, the US State Department currently places Jammu and Kashmir, except Eastern Ladakh and Leh, under a level 4 of do not travel advisory, thereby citing terrorism and civil unrest. Let's listen in to what the US Ambassador had to say.
It's a pleasure to be here. As everybody here knows, I'm the U.S. Ambassador to India, and this is an important part of India, and so I'm here visiting for the first time. It is an incredibly beautiful place, and so I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to see this place. We just had a very good meeting, and we have some follow-ups that we hope to take back to Washington, back to Delhi, but a very warm, a very cordial, and we look forward to building this relationship forward. The United States puts out travel warnings, and every so often we reevaluate those travel warnings. I cannot make any big announcements here today, but it is something we're going to look at. New Delhi, the Chief Minister here, the government here, we believe have made some incredible steps to keeping this area safer and making it more safe. And so we will be looking at if the travel warning that is imposed, that is recommended by the United States, is something that should be downgraded, because, as I said earlier, this is a beautiful area. I think a lot of Americans would enjoy coming here and seeing the beauty and the opportunities that exist here.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Tonight. Goodbye from me, Shubhani Kharat, and my colleague Jude Sanad. Bye-bye.